Hello everyone, my name is Luke Maybee, and today I'm going to be talking about a tale of two strategic cities, Washington DC, located here in the US, and Moscow, located in Russia. And I'm going to be kind of comparing these two cities based on four categories that I will go into. These two cities have incredible geopolitical importance and both importance to their own people, the people of Russia and the people of the United States. This is a series that I want to begin, and I want to continue by comparing two cities and really diving deep into them. So to begin, we'll be looking at these two cities based on their military presence, the military presence located in those cities. So in Washington, D.C., there are no direct military bases, but there is the Pentagon, which is headquartered in nearby Arlington, Virginia. The Pentagon houses major military command centers and the Department of Defense, or the DoD. This is also a strategic military planning center for NATO and U.S. forces. D.C. does not have a standing army, but it is protected by federal forces. Now, about the Pentagon, this really is the heart of the American military, and it makes sense why it was such an obvious target for Al-Qaeda on September 11, 2001. But the Pentagon has been rebuilt and has recovered since that time 20 years ago. Now, on to Moscow. The headquarters of the Russian armed forces are located there, as well as multiple military installations and bases. This is the center of the mighty Russian military industry. There are also significant strategic missile command centers located in Moscow, and significant air defense systems located there, which have been quite busy lately with some Ukrainian drone attacks that have been advancing toward Moscow. Those air defense systems have had to be very, very occupied. Now moving on to the political category of these two cities. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States, and it has been so since 1790. It is a federal district and not a state. So D.C. in the name stands for District of Columbia. So it's a federal district. The city is actually located between Georgetown, Maryland, and Alexandria, Virginia. The city is kind of split between those two cities and those two states. There's no voting representation in Congress, but the three branches of the U.S. government are located in D.C., and it is also a major diplomatic center with 177 foreign embassies. I've been to a few embassies in D.C., and it is a very cool thing to see how much of a global presence is in D.C. Moscow has been the capital of the Russian Federation since 1918. It has a federal city status and is the seat of the Russian government, with the Kremlin being the building that houses the Russian State Duma and the Federation Council. And this really is the center of Russian political power, and there are approximately 145 foreign embassies in Moscow. So a little bit less than DC, but still quite a few. Now moving on to the religious component, the religious makeup of these two cities, which is something that is very important. As you've probably seen in history, religion and politics are often intertwined. So many of the conflicts and the wars over the past years have started because of religious conflicts. So this is an important thing to consider as we compare these two cities. Washington, D.C. is predominantly Christian at 65%. There's a large Protestant population there, and there is a significant Catholic presence there as well. The National Cathedral, which I have been to, is a very large, impressive structure that is in D.C. However, there is a growing secular population and various religious minorities there in D.C. as well now. There are many notable religious buildings, including the National Cathedral, as I mentioned, and the Basilica of the National Shrine. Now, Moscow is predominantly Russian Orthodox at over 70% of its population is Russian Orthodox. It is the historical center of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Christ the Savior Cathedral is its main cathedral. There's a significant Muslim minority as well in Moscow. About 20 years ago, there were the Chechen Wars, which was a conflict where the Russian Federation invaded Chechnya, which is a region in Russia, and Chechnya has a significant Muslim majority. So even though you might think, well, it's Russia, I wouldn't expect to be as much of a Muslim population. There is a significant Muslim presence in the Caucasus, and not as much in Moscow, but there is a Muslim presence even in that general area. There's also a growing secular population in Moscow, despite there being multiple historic churches and monasteries located in that city. Now moving on to the economy. Washington, D.C. does have a service-based economy. As you might expect, the federal government is the largest employer in that city. And there's a major tourism industry there because it's the capital of our country. Everyone on their bucket list of cities to go to, certainly DC is right at the top of the list because of all the museums, all the historical sites, and the different cultural experiences as well there. There's a significant lobbying and consulting sector there. And as you might imagine, there's a very high cost of living, the high cost of living when it comes to our nation's capital. The GDP, gross domestic product, is around 160 billion in the metro area, and there are very strong education and healthcare sectors. The city's been around for a while, so there's a lot of infrastructure that has been built to support it. Now, Moscow, it's the largest economy in Russia, major financial center, significant industrial base, large service sector, important tech hub. Moscow is the cornerstone city of Russia, without a doubt, with a GDP of 600 billion. Now let's talk about the geographic locations of these two cities to kind of get some more context. So Washington, D.C. is located on the Potomac River, has a area of about 68.34 square miles. It's a humid subtropical climate. The weather can vary a good bit there. At the moment, there has been a lot of winter weather, some snow that has come into DC. It's a pretty flat city that was built on former swampland, and it is located in the mid-Atlantic region. So I myself, I only live around 3.5 hours from it. At least in my opinion, I think it's located in a very prime spot for the rest of the country. And the average temperature is like 58 degrees Fahrenheit, 14.4 degrees Celsius. So it's a pretty mild climate as a whole. Now, Moscow is located on the Moscow River, has an area of 970 square miles. So as you can imagine, quite a bit larger than Washington, D.C. Slightly more elevation, around 400 to 800 feet, spread across the city. It is located on the Russian plain, and it is the largest city in Europe by land area. And because it is in that part of the world, the average temperature is 42.8 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius. So the average temperature is a lot colder. And now, as I was saying about the largest city, it is the largest city in Europe by land area. If you would like, you can study the two major conquests or attempts to conquer Russia. The first one was by Napoleon, and the second was by Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. And you can see how close those two parties came to actually conquering Russia in Moscow. It's a very difficult city to conquer because it's hard to really protrude that deeply into Russia to really secure and capture it. Now, to kind of summarize, I'm going to talk about some key differences between these two cities so you can get a better understanding of how they compare. So first, in the scale, Moscow is significantly larger in both population and physical size than DC. Political structure. DC does lack full political representation, while Moscow has complete political rights. Military presence. Moscow has direct military installations, while DC's are in surrounding areas. So a lot of the military intelligence, like the CIA, is located outside of DC in like Northern Virginia. A lot of the military intelligence structures of the US are just outside of DC, while everything is in Moscow itself. Religious composition. There's much more religious diversity in DC versus Moscow's Orthodox dominance. Very important to remember. And economic base. DC is much more government and service focused, while Moscow has a more diverse economic base. So with that, I hope you had a good sense of how these two cities compare. There have been several attempts to try and capture Moscow. There hasn't really been a serious attempt to really take control of DC since the War of 1812, which if you want to study that, our national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key during this war. It's kind of known as a forgotten war, but a very interesting attempt on very interesting thing to study on how close the British actually came to capturing our nation's capital. So with that, I hope you enjoyed seeing how these two cities compare. I hope to do many more of these kinds of videos highlighting the differences between all the cities in the world. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day and keep your eyes on the globe.